If you've been shopping for a home, you newly bought an overpriced home, or you're just plain worried, we know this housing market is bringing in a lot of anxiety for our viewers, Paul. So how can you guide us through this?
So guys, first off, I never want anybody to be overly alarmed by anything that happens. That's not going to add any benefit. All you need to do is calm down and say, okay, there are certain things in front of me I have to react to. First off, this is the Case-Shiller index for the last 35 years or something like that. Guys, the average home back in 1987 or 1986, whatever it was, 1987 was $64,000. Ironically, our first house we ever bought was in 1987 for $62,500. It is now, in the most recent data, $297,000.
This is the average house? Is 300 grand?
Yep.
Oh my God.
Now look at 1 year. Last year, 245 and now 296. Guys, home prices are up a ton. Okay, so everybody's having flashbacks to 06 and 07. We're having PTSD, like, oh my God. One of the most common questions I get is, Paul, when is the housing crash going to come? I never said, I don't believe there's a housing crash coming. Does that mean it won't happen? No. But the things that made the housing bubble 2005, 2006 occur are not occurring today. Yes, do we see a lot of frothiness in the market? Absolutely. I'm more concerned about a commercial housing crash, commercial real estate crash, than a residential. And here's why. Back then, Seth, you could walk into a bank and say, I make $500,000 a year, and they didn't verify it, and they gave you $1 million mortgage, and they didn't care. Yep. And back then, you can get adjustable mortgage for like 1.5%. And what you didn't realize was it would adjust in 6 months, and all of a sudden your mortgage payment would quadruple. Okay? That's not occurring anymore. Even when I go get a mortgage now, I actually get annoyed with how much I have to like give them. I'm like, to my own bank, guys, you have my information.
Isn't that funny?
It's unbelievable. It's like I'm like, okay. Now, with that said, there's also inflation, and inflation's going up. Inflation helps real estate prices, okay? We just made a video on the top 5 hedges to inflation, and one of them is real estate. Inflation helps prices for real estate. Why? Because the cost to build a house goes up. So if your house is here for $300,000 and now it costs $400,000 to replicate your house next door, guess what happened to your home price?
It goes up.
It goes up. Why? Maybe it's $375 because somebody could rather pay 25 grand more for a new house, but your house goes up in price. Secondly, when inflation increases, so does your income, and you make your mortgage payment based on your income. The higher your income goes up, the more the mortgage payment goes, the more you can afford in mortgage payment. But that leads us to our biggest concern. Interest rates have skyrocketed. Seth, a year and a half ago,
yep,
my now fiance got a 2.625% interest rate on our house.
Yep.
30-year fixed. This was a year and a half ago. It is now 5.75%. She's locked in this rate for 30 years, 28 and a half more years.
Amazing.
So what does this mean? Well, guys, that's 3% more. If you have our friend Hesh, I asked him recently, Hesh, the average person wants a $300,000 house. How much they make? He goes 90 to 120. I said, okay, let's call it 100. After taxes, we're at 70. So you have a $300,000 house. Let's call it a $300,000 mortgage. At a 3% increase, that's 2.625 to 5.75. That is $9,000 a year more. That is $750 a month extra. $750 a month when you're making $70,000 after taxes, about $6,000 a month, is a big chunk of money.
It's like a whole nother mortgage.
That's the point. That's my only level where I go, you know what? That causes a lot of concern for me for housing prices. We've already seen a slowdown. New home sales are down 14%. We've had the 4th month in a row of existing home sales down. But the interesting part is they just announced home prices are up again.
I don't get it.
Well, again, inflation really drives that number.
I see.
So if you go out there and you want to go, I just bought a house to renovate. The numbers I'm getting for renovation costs, I'm just like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
Numbers that 5 years ago, I never thought I'd be paying. And now I'm just like, oh, that's a good deal. Like literally numbers 5 years ago, I thought there's no way I'm paying that anytime soon. And now it's a great deal. So these are the things these are the good things about housing. But the one thing that I get concerned about is interest rates. If they go up really quick, really fast, that could really slow things down, which by the way, is probably the Fed's goal.
What rate could they get to? How scary could this get?
Well, we already increased 0.75 this last month when they were expecting 0.5 a month ago. Mm-hmm. And they've already said they're probably going to do 0.75 again in July. Now, if all of a sudden inflation comes back and it just plummeted for some miracle reason, they might only raise 0.25 or 0.5. But the Fed is adamant about fighting inflation. And they've said we want to get inflation back to 2%. Hey, spoiler alert, that's going to be really difficult. Long-term averages are what they are. And I still believe that long-term, we will average 3 to 4% a year. But right now, 8.6%, that is affecting all the people that it shouldn't affect way, way too much. And that's got to change.
So Paul, if I'm a new couple here, I need to buy a home for my family. What strategy should I employ?
So this is a very common question that I get in our community, in the chats. People are like, hey, Paul, I'm moving to a new city. Should I buy a house? I lay it out very simple. Do you plan on living in that house for 2 or 3 years or 20 or 30 years? If they say 20 or 30 years, I say, listen, go buy your home, put a reasonable mortgage on there, realize you're paying more than you did a year ago, nothing you can change about that. If rates happen to fall again because the economy plummets, they want to respur things, refinance. But if you're only going to stay for 2 or 3 years and your next house is only a few years, I would say wait until you have more of a clear picture. Now, does that mean for sure? No, I just believe in if you have a long-term desire to stay in a home, I wouldn't even worry if prices feel overpriced as much. Is it still a concern? Absolutely. But remember, 20 or 30 years, putting 20% down payment, even if your home price stays exactly the same for 30 years, just paying it off, you'll get a 7 or 8% return on your money. So don't be as afraid. But if your outlook is very short term, just pump the brakes until you have a more solid plan about your future. If your income is going to go up, if you're a young person, 25 years old, your income's going to go up a lot in the next few years, probably, the next 10, 15, 20 years. So maybe buy a lesser house than you can afford. That way, when you do upgrade in a better time, if you want to keep your house as a rental, or if you have to take a hit on your house, it's not a big deal because it was a smaller house and less money. But this interest rate is really going to cost you more money versus it cost me. I was hoping to lock in. When I first decided to build a house 6-7 months ago, I was like, okay, great, I'll get 3%.
Yeah.
I was just quoted 4% before the 0.75% hike. Who knows what I'm maybe at right now?
You gave me this exact advice when I bought my home and when I refinanced. And you told me at the time that it's okay to somewhat overbuy if you expect your career to progress. And sure enough.
And if you expect to live there for a long time.
Yes,
and you bought a beautiful home.
Both. Yeah.
And you're like, Paul, this would be my final home. I'm like, then don't worry about it.
And looking back, I am fine and everything's great. And
I wonder what your house is worth now.
That's great advice.
Well, I mean, listen, I give a lot of advice and it was great timing.
Yeah.
But I wonder what your home is worth now. What do you think? I mean, percentage-wise, higher.
You know, I bought it. Should I give numbers?
It's up to you if you want to give numbers.
They're public. I bought the house at $540, and yesterday Zillow said $740, Paul.
Come on.
It's been...
Guys, Seth bought this house 3 years ago?
3 years ago, exactly. So it's just completely ridiculous. Because one day you told me this is going to be $1 million home one day, 20 years from now.
Yeah, I thought 20 years from now it's going to be $1 million home.
So, yeah, I mean, I know Zillow, you take it with a grain of salt, but...
Well, I find Zillow to be very accurate in the average home price range when there's a lot of comps in the neighborhood that are very similar. The houses in the neighborhood are very similar.
So the final stage is, Paul, is what if I'm a younger couple and I recently got into a home at a very high and overpriced where I had to bid over ask with a lot of competition. Now what's going to happen?
Well, you might want to look at your house and go, wait, we thought we were overpaying and now it's, like you said, Seth.
Yeah.
Now your house is worth 10. I mean, prices are up 10% in the last, 20% in the last year. Mm-hmm. So Tim over here, Tim, great story. When Tim was selling his house, can I tell a story, Tim? Tim was selling his house a year ago. I said, Tim, keep your house as an investment property. He's like, yeah, I want to. And he and his wife back and forth. Finally decided, you know, we're going to sell it. He just told me yesterday on a treadmill. He was hoping to get $1,500 to $1,600 in rent for that house. He owed nothing on it. He owed like under $100,000 for this house. $93,000 for this house that he sold for $175,000. He was at his brother-in-law's house, and the house next door, well, it was a little bit bigger than his house. It was sizably bigger than his house, but they were getting $3,000 in rent. Tim was like, I could easily get $2,000 in rent right now.
Yeah.
And I look at Lisa. Lisa and I are getting married, but I still want to have her investments for her. And this house is her investment. And I just tell her, like, Lisa, we're going to get, if your house is furnished, we're going to get $3,500 to $4,000 a month all day. And her mortgage payment is less than $2,000 a month.
Oh, so you're keeping it?
Oh, absolutely. I want it to be her investment. Yeah, nice. Of course. I want her to have an investment. And if she ever kicks me out the door, I can be like, well, you know, you can go live there. No, I'm just kidding around.
So if my anxiety's building up, you're saying...
Listen, if you have a fixed rate mortgage that you can afford and you have upside in your career, it might be Seth, when you bought your first house, you were like, you bought 190. You're like, oh, can we afford this?
Right.
And then all of a sudden, you sold it for $300 and some $1,000. You're like, that's the thing. I've heard advice before. If you're going to be in your house for a long time, there's common advice. I'm not saying to do it. Buy the most expensive house you can afford. Because as your income increases, as inflation increases, you're going to be happy you did. If this all makes sense to you or you have more questions, click on this next video. We made it to show you that the upcoming recession could be the opportunity of a lifetime for you.